Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. We apologize for the late start of the program. Your Excellency, Mr. John Agyekum Kufuor, former President of the Republic of Ghana, Your Excellencies, Mr. Kanute, the Executive Secretary of the Media Foundation for West Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this forum, this conversation, hopefully the first in a series of conversations with some of the elder statesmen of our country. This is a conversation with the former president, Mr. John Agyekum Kufuor, excuse me, under the theme Government Media Relations in a Developing Democracy. It's, as you know, been organized by the Media Foundation for West Africa. And I'm going to ask the Executive Director, Professor Kwame Kakari, to begin with his welcome remarks to set the tone for the forum. Prof.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sechiado. One of the important things in any culture is how you introduce people, even ordinary people. We were in South Africa, the Rhodes University in Grahamstown in Audrey, that was July, early July. And Mr. Agyekum Kufuor was on a panel of the Congress of the World Journalism Educators Conference. There was one of the coordinators or moderator of that particular panel who treated us to some very interesting explanation of how you address people who had once been presidents. He said they can be described as ex-president, former president, and retired president. Now, if you are described as, according to our colleague, if you are an ex-president, it means that you may have been a president, but your presidency was truncated violently. You were overthrown by a coup d'etat or a civil war, so you are an ex-president. If you are a former president, you would have been a president at one point, but then your presidency may have ended ignominiously. So you would be referred to as former president. But if you, and he said in Africa, there are not that many, but Mr. Kufuor was one of those who ended their presidency democratically, and therefore he is a retired president. And according to him, if somebody is a retired president, they can continue to be called president as the title before their names. Today, the Media Foundation for West Africa is very proud to bring all of you here together to have a conversation with our retired president, one of only very few retired presidents in Africa, and one of only 2 retired presidents in Ghana. We welcome you to this program to commemorate the repeal of the criminal libel law 9 years ago. The forum today has one principal objective, and that is to have a dialogue with President John Agyekum Kufuor to give account of the relationship between his government and the media. it is significant that we have a conversation with a man who signed the bill that ended the life of this very dangerous legislation. The forum, let me repeat, is strictly about Mr. Kufuor's tenure as president and no more or less. We will restrict every conversation here to the relations between the media and his government during his presidency, and not on any other topic or subject. We want to repeat that because why are we doing that? It is not because we don't want to talk about the past before his tenure or the present after his tenure. We do talk about every period in our history. But this is solely so that we don't lose focus and we don't be diverted, in order that whatever lessons we will learn from his experiences, we can mull over them. And so please, we plead with you to restrict yourself absolutely to that period and to the subject of government-media relations. Why are we doing this today? And people may ask, why must we celebrate the repeal of the law? The answer is simple. For me, the repeal of that law is like the attainment of the freedom of the tongue and the pen in this country's history. The attainment of the freedom and independence of the tongue and of the pen. Why am I saying this? To understand some of these things, we must briefly just remind you of history. The first codification of the criminal code by the colonial administration was in 1892. And that 1892 ordinance included laws that were on sedition. Now, after that, in 1934, there was the Criminal Code Amendment, where the actual law of sedition, as we have known it up to now, was included in a section called Section 330. This amendment now became the source of a lot of havoc for all people who attempted to say anything that was unpleasant to the colonial government. So we have had many of our major leaders fall foul of this law and then be abused by authority. One of them in 1936 was Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Pan-African freedom fighter who later became the first governor of independent Nigeria, and then a Sierra Leonean called Wallace Johnson, ITA Wallace Johnson. But let's rush down to history. In the 1950s, this law was also slapped on virtually every important name we can have in our independence struggle. Kwame Nkrumah and others went to jail many times. Many of them went to jail under this law. Now, coming closer to our time, in 1978, the Achampong government slapped this law on Mr. J.H. Mensah. Why? Because he had written an article that criticized the economic policies of that government. We don't want to bore you. This platform is a conversation with our president. So I'll simply say that the repeal of this law marks for some of us one of the most cardinal events in our march to build a democratic culture in our country. Because if in a democracy people cannot express their minds, their thoughts, and their words without fear, then really there can be no democracy. When we went to discuss this program with the president, I reminded him that in our country, there is a particular phrase or sentence that has always been used for a very long time, perhaps receding only during the Fourth Republic. And that is, if you want to say anything about government in our country for all these years since colonial rule, anybody who loves you, who respects you, will tap you and say that, Kweku, hey, yebecho jaika. But lately, that sentence seems to have receded. And I think that the repeal of this law has contributed to that recession of that very dangerous cautionary statement. We are also doing this, as Kweku hinted you, because the Media Foundation is preparing for the 10th anniversary of the repeal of this law to do a national conference where we'll bring lawyers to look at all the laws that are still on our books that we consider to be dangerous for free expression. So this is a prelude, and we thought that we should precede that national conference by bringing the man who signed the repeal of this law. For me, if in all his tenure of office, I think that this was the most important contribution he made to our democracy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you and ask our friend Kweku to start the discussion, which will take the form of the president making some brief remarks. Afterward, Kweku would take him through a series of issues for him to discuss, and then after that, we will all come in, and as I've said, and let me repeat, stick to the subject matter for today. He is here. Everybody knows where he lives. You can also phone in on the radio, as everybody does, to say whatever you want about him. But here, this is our platform. Respect our rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kakari. It is my pleasure now to invite President, having retired, President Kufuor to the rostrum to say a few words before I engage him. Mr. President.
Do I call you President? Mr. President, my brother, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. There's not much to say because I've come prepared to converse with you, interact with you, and on this very important matter of press/media freedom. But I would only start off saying that I believe my party also believes, it's a cornerstone of our party, that a free man is by far more productive than an oppressed man. And when we talk of oppressed, we are considering, say, a man in serfdom, a slave, a prisoner, a muzzled man, a man living in fear. When you are talking of productivity, we don't want to consider the enslaved human, because that person really can't produce using all the God-given faculties that a man should have. And I believe because of this belief in the free agency of the human being, we also have democracy as the best system of governance anywhere. Our forebears here talk Dankwa, you talk Buzia, and many others within the tradition of our party, always upheld democratic governance as the best form of governance. With all its difficulties, the best form of governance any peoples could have anywhere. They subscribed to the universality of man on this basis, that man anywhere, with any color, in any location was basically the same, and that the talents or the virtues humanity must have must be honored and respected. And central to these virtues are the freedom of thought and also of expression. I believe that when you talk free press or media, you are only reflecting this fundamental right of man, freedom of expression. So this is what the tradition that weaned me in politics imbued me with. I've grown with it. I've been in politics for over 40 years. So when I talk like this, you should know that I'm talking about article of faith. We believe in it in Italy. The tradition, we believe, is the oldest in Ghana, political tradition. Unfortunately, also languished in the wilderness for so long, very long, from the 1947, when the idea of party politics was launched in Ghana, launched by J.B. Dankwa, Pa Grant, and others, and Kwame Nkrumah, who came to join later. This tradition remained in the backwaters of power. Tradition was never in power. From colonial times through independence, we were always on the opposition side till 1969, when the PP, Progress Party, got elected. Then I was also elected as a member of parliament on the party's ticket. Was made the deputy foreign minister of our country at the age of 30. My mentor was the then Prime Minister Bozea, a man who lived, breathed, talked, advised respect for humanity and man's rights as the basis for democracy. As a lot of you would remember, those of you who were mature then, he was so traduced by media, but he never caused the arrest of anybody. He was so tolerant, and his tolerance was taken for his weakness, even within our party. But he insisted man should be allowed to think and to express himself. It continued with us, but we were in power for only 2 years, 3 months when the soldiers came and kicked us out unconstitutionally. We stayed not even in opposition, because the soldiers stayed on for, 8 long years. I didn't allow parliament to function. Parties were abolished. And till 1979, when the Third Republican Constitution was adopted, and we were allowed to go back into multi-party democracy. Unfortunately, this time around, 79, when we went to the polls, my party lost. And so we continued to stay on the opposition benches. The civilian regime that came under Dr. Liman also stayed for just 2 years, 3 months, like Bozia's regime. Within that short period, yes, in parliament, I was member of parliament on the opposition benches. Yes, we exercised some freedom of expression, and we encouraged the media also to function. But again, just 2 years, 3 months, the soldiers came back and again kicked the government out, and then they stayed on, I would say, for the better part of, about 12 years or so, during which freedom of expression was virtually banished, to the extent that an academic coined the phrase, culture of silence. The culture of silence came to prevail throughout the country. We all lived in fear of expressing ourselves, even to our families. And so you could imagine nobody could write anything in the newspapers or express themselves on the airwaves. Till again 1992, when the Fourth Republican Constitution was promulgated and multi-party system got relaunched. From 92 till we came into office 2001, there was, I would say, a gingering of this freedom of expression. There were some newspapers, a few radio stations, but unfortunately, because there had been a conversion from military rule, which was to some of us quite despotic, to a civil rule, the soldier taking off the uniform and donning mufti and purporting to be civilian, the atmosphere still was charged. People were not too sure as to whether expressing themselves too freely or writing too freely might not lead to dire consequences for them. And some pressmen, for expressing themselves too liberally, got picked up and got incarcerated. I think I can think of Kwaku Bako, Harry Naita, and quite a few others. Earlier, some had even died in prisons. Is it Tommy Thompson, the owner of that newspaper that was quite popular in those times? So the atmosphere was not quite liberalized. But when we were in opposition, we found ourselves not being assisted in the media. Even though we expressed ourselves, because that's our tradition, we always thought freely and expressed ourselves freely. We found our voices didn't carry because there weren't the newspaper or media agencies to carry our voices. We didn't have what I would describe as our party papers. We didn't have strong ones. And so it seemed like our ideas were muffled. Because of this, we felt gravely cheated in the system. And we swore to ourselves that if ever we would get the opportunity to come into power, one of the first things we would do would be to tackle the law, as the good professor here had said, to remove it, take it off altogether, so that we would allow humanity to thrive and express itself according to how it felt or thought. And truly, by 2001, we got the opportunity. And it was the first law the government I led decided to repeal. We went to town, we virtually rushed to repeal it, to give freedom to the atmosphere here for people to think and to express themselves without fear. So this is the background to our passage of that law, to repeal it and let people express themselves. Earlier, before we came to power, some young, very outspoken person, Dr. Agyekum Kufuor, had tried to set up an FM station, talking of the airwaves. Is it Radio I or something? Yes. And that was before we came to power. But this thing was quickly nipped by the then authorities, because they saw the power that was being unleashed through that experiment. But the very short period radio I got the opportunity, we felt the impact it made across the society of Ghana. And people were demanding more of that initiative. So when we got the chance in power, we said, clear off that law that muzzled and shackled people from thinking and talking. We did. And again, within a very short period, we saw a mushrooming of FM stations all over Ghana. In fact, since then, within a space of 10 years or so, we found there were more than 100 FM stations sprouting all over the country. It was the same with the print media. There were newspapers of all sorts coming, and of course, there was so much freedom of expression, a lot of them very abusive, to the extent that some of our own party men came to us to ask, don't you think your government has acted a bit too rashly and letting off, when, with all due respect, say birds have been caged for a long time and you open the cage, what happens? The birds would rush out, and the first moments you see them running helter-skelter or flying all over the place, and it's exactly the same when people have been gagged for too long and you allow them to speak. Everybody speaks, and there's such discordancy, the noises that came. So people asked us whether what we had done was the right thing, because a lot of the criticisms were against the government. But because we believed that it was the right thing to do, and that in due course the public would learn, because it's a learning process. Even how to use your freedom, I believe, demands disciplines. Because we believed in due course that people would be able to tell the difference between sensible opinionation and criticism, one side, from the hot air criticism, and that it would be good cumulatively for the states or for our nation in due course. Because we believed in that, we stuck to our guns and said, no, what we've done is a matter of principle, let it grow. And as I speak now, I believe the country is getting some dividends. Throughout the world, Ghana now is acknowledged as a beacon of democracy. I believe the free air and expression has also contributed towards the nurturing of good governance. And now we all talk of transparency and accountability. I believe these virtues are thriving on the freedom of expression that we are getting under the leadership of the free media. So we haven't regretted it at all, and we believe even the investments that got quadrupled within the 8-year period of our government was as a result of the opening of the airwaves to freedom of thought and freedom of expression. So, Mr. Chairman, friends, I believe it was a good policy government implemented by repealing that ancient law that sought to perpetuate the dominance of the state in government. This is what I want to say for opening, but I'm prepared that questions are put to me, and then we interact.
I'd like you to please move your microphones if you wish to capture Mr. Kufuor's remarks. I think his remarks are...
Well, the regular papers that we all read. Graphic Times for working days and weekends, Mirror, Spectator. These are, you may say they are state papers, but for a long time, they were about the only main papers accessible to all of us. But along the way, some private media came up. I see that Ambassador Cabral is looking me straight in the face because I would subscribe to his newspapers, Independent, yeah, and also Free Press. Ohini was editor of Chronicle. I also appreciated. So these were the papers. But along the way to Kwaku Baku's papers, Crusading Guide, and now the new Crusading Guide, and also the Daily Guide. Dispatch, occasionally when I wanted to see how the psephologists, as I described Ben Efson, is pontificating on how to win votes and that sort of thing. I would occasionally look at that. Psephologist, yes, that's a specialist in voting practices, yes. So I would look at that too, occasionally. The public agenda, when it features or publishes features, I would, perhaps for education, also look at it occasionally. But a lot of times I tend to find it too ideological, and I don't like too much ideology. So, but these are some of the things I look at. Haruna test paper too, when it was functioning, I think I looked at it.
That was the Accra Daily Mail.
Accra Daily Mail, yes.
How about papers like the Democrat, the New Democrat, Lens, and Crystal?
I told you I don't like too much ideology.
Palava.
I tend to see them as propagandists, and I don't want to waste too much time on them.
Did anybody tell you what these papers said? You know, did they summarize it and bring it to your attention?
No, I'll be candid with you because I believe people close to me know that I don't appreciate that type of media. But occasionally I would be forced, when I'm, say, listening to radio talk shows, to take account of some of them because somehow they get relate. But ordinarily, I wouldn't buy those papers. And as I say, people close to me won't summarize and present to me.
What about radio and television? Did you find time to, on your way to work from your residence, did you listen to the radio?
Occasionally. But every morning, these days, I wake up to the talk shows. I enjoy Peace a lot of times, City FM, Choice FM. Saturdays, the news file of Joy. And then GBC. Of course, lately, we hear of Adom and Omai. Include them.
Did you listen to Front Page on Joy on Friday mornings?
Is that your?
Yes, sir.
when I'm in town and say I'm spared visitors, then I think I listen.
I wanted to clear that.
Okay.
And what about television?
Television, again, the 4 stations, the TV, is it one?
TV3.
Yeah, Africa,
GTV.
Yes.
TV Africa.
Yes.
You did.
Yes, I do.
Was it the news? Was it the
Some would
Latin
be
American
news,
soaps?
Some would be talk shows, Kwaku One-on-One and things like that. Occasionally I listen.
Okay. No, I was.
Or watch.
Okay, I was asking whether, apart from the news and some of the interview programs, what about, television or the media also offer entertainment? Did you get entertainment from the media?
Yes. I talked of the weekend papers, especially Mirror, Spectator. I get entertainment. And lately, too, I've taken to enjoying the cartoons from Daily Guide.
Akusia's cartoons.
Yes.
Did you find the media, for you as president, were the media informative? Did they give you any information that helped your leadership, that informed you make important decisions?
They made inputs, but a president has many sources of information. First source would come from the security agencies. For instance, the Central Intelligence Committee would give every morning a summary of whatever is going on around the country. That's first line. Of course, if you have time to scan the papers, you would also pick information from here and there. And opinions, a lot of times, on, say, policies and issues that perhaps you feel very close on. You'd read an opinion that would jog you and make you have second thoughts. So, yes, the media contribute. They make you, give you a range. So the media contribute to informing the president, yes.
After you signed the repeal, the law that repealed the criminal libel, did you at any point have second thoughts in spite of your articles of faith that you spoke about earlier on?
I haven't regretted it ever, no. Because we'd been victims, as I say, my side of the political divide had been victim over a long period, perhaps since the beginnings of party politics in Ghana. I think we've been conditioned psychologically that it was right to get rid of that law, to allow freedom of expression. And I haven't regretted it. We are taking very long-term view of things. And we believe in due course, our society would mature to the point where it would be discriminating between good media and bad media. So I haven't regretted it.
Do you think that we are at that point, or before you say the final year before you left office, did you think we were at that point where we could discern?
We are still not fully mature. We haven't matured to the point where, say, the general public could be credited with full discernment. But we are getting there, and getting there very fast, because it's ICT age we are in, and everything moves very rapidly. Even the children are getting to know. Because, see, we are no more like an insulated society. The influences from around the world, I believe, are also all helping to shape us to appreciate the nuances of information. So we are getting there, but I don't think we are there yet.
During the last, maybe it must have been 2006 or 2007, thereabout, when the newspapers, some newspapers carried stories about the gold reserves having disappeared, that papers alleged you had affairs and had twins with, out of wedlock and so on. Didn't you, even then, you still thought, oh, man's freedom is fundamental. They ought to be accorded these freedoms?
No, I never believe in absolute freedom. I never. I believe all freedom should be exercised with responsibility, sense of responsibility. But I've been sensitive to use of the state power. Because if you are not careful, like a parent, if you are, say, nurturing your child, you are not careful, you might exercise a measure of discipline that might break the spirit of the child. It's the same with the president, given the background from which we were coming. And, when I say we were coming here, I would extend it to the continent of Africa. I believe that Africa's bane has been bad leadership. And I'm even in the process of trying to set up a center for the study of leadership, governance, and development. And so I've been sensitive to the use of state power to quell delinquent media, like talking of Kufuor taking gold reserves. Where would Kufuor carry the gold reserves, and with what cranes would I carry them from the central bank? I haven't even been to the vault of the central bank, and the people there know. So it's so untrue. I knew that my opponents were trying to, talking of propaganda, influence the public for electoral purposes. Somehow I believed the people of Ghana would not be taken in by that low level of propaganda. So I didn't think it was worth my unleashing state power, which would be formidable on the small media using that sort of propaganda. That Kufuor had twins, I didn't consider as a crime at all. Suppose I were polygamist, well, our laws were not against polygamy. Of course, I am a Catholic, so naturally, I should be monogamist, and that is what I am. They made allegations. I think they were challenged to produce evidence. They couldn't. So I was expecting the people generally to know that the people weren't serious. Like, I was also accused of dipping my hand in state coffers to furnish my home. It's the biggest lie that ever was told. Unfortunately, it was being told by people who should have known better. They persist. Even today, or yesterday, I heard, today, some people making the allegation. I've lived in my own house throughout the tenure of office. And I've lived in that house since 1985. There's not a chair in the house that was acquired by state resource. 8 years, I never took rent from the state. If anybody who wants to know, and you are media, so I would want you to research, you find that I never took rent from the state. And so when they put it out like that, and somebody who is a minister now even took me to Shraj. I went to Shraj. President of Ghana, I submitted to the jurisdiction of the Shraj. I went, I engaged a lawyer, I answered the allegations. Shraj invited the person to come and substantiate. He didn't turn up. Well, we made it public that the man had lied, but somehow the propagandists persisted. And to this day, they still say Kufuor dipped his hand into state coffers. What really happened was, because I couldn't live in the castle, and I gave reasons why I couldn't go to the castle to live, the security system moved to the house and said they needed security lights, advantage points around the walls. They put the lights up. That's not furnishing my house. That's not adding anything at all to the structure of the house. And as I said, the house was completed, I think, about 1982. I've lived there since 85. Not a wall has been broken to be renovated or to be repaired or anything of the sort. So the state hasn't done any refurbishment whatsoever to this property. And the security lights, lamps they put there, then they put a watchtower at the back wall so they could see, because the rail line runs behind the house. So then they said it was necessary for them to look over the wall to ensure nobody would cross the rail line to climb. So they put that wall there. Small watchtower is still there. Anybody who cares to come to the house can see it. That's all they did. Somehow, the people from PW